Maybe not. I thought that was going to be smooth countdown, but we are live.
All right, y'all. We're live. We're back. We're doing it again. And tonight we have another amazing guest joining us. We are in the fitness realm again. We're stepping away from the wrestling mat. We're getting off the cross country course, talking a little bit more about some unique ways to optimize your strength and your mobility and just your overall fitness. We are with head coach, co-founder of GMB Fitness, Ryan Hurst. GMB Fitness is a company that offers online training programs to help people improve their strength, flexibility, and control. GMB's methods are based on exercises from gymnastics, physical therapy, martial arts, and other movement disciplines. And their programs are designed to be simple and effective, requiring only 15 to 45 minutes a few times a week with minimal equipment. Right up our alley, things we like to do, bang for your buck. Ryan, thank you for joining us tonight. Welcome to Airey Bros Radio. How are you tonight?
Thank you guys so much for having me. I love that intro. I'll pay you later for that. That was good. So
That's all Jimmy there. So Ryan, yeah, we are excited to have you on, and we really have a great conversation, hopefully planned, and some great questions for you. But before we get into all that stuff, the floor is yours. Any social, any websites, anywhere anyone's listening to this, young or old, that is intrigued and wants to find out more information about what you going on, let them have it. The floor is yours.
yeah, we keep it simple on the interwebs. Doesn't matter what channel you're looking at. Everything from TikTok. We're actually not on TikTok, but everything from Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, internet, whatever. Just type in GMB Fitness and you can find us. And that's it. And by the way, if you ever have any questions, feel free to hit us up at info@gmb.io, and a real person is gonna talk with you. And so we pride ourselves on our support. And any question you ask, we will try to answer it. And if we can't answer it, we probably know somebody who can, and we'll refer you out to them. So again, GMB Fitness, check it out. Yeah.
Awesome.
What a concept. Actual people that get back
Actual
to your
real people.
question. Wow. Wow. Um, Ryan, we like to kind of give our guests a through line, how we found them, how we came across them. So, like Rich said, we got into the fitness stuff as we were getting done with college, and we had a moment where we were heavy into CrossFit, and then I had a moment when I was heavy not into CrossFit, and I wanted to do everything but that. I burnt myself out,
Mm.
and I was trying everything just to kind of find a fitness practice, but because of CrossFit, kind of found the love for gymnastics, got some movement patterns in there that I necessarily didn't have when I was an athlete, but I liked getting upside down, and I kind of wanted to take that to the next step. So rewind to about 2013. I don't know how I found GMB, but I did, and I bought the floor program, I bought some
Sweet.
handstand stuff, I bought some stretching stuff, and I just went all in for a good year, just playing around with that in the backyard, doing cartwheels in a straight line and all that. And my neighbors probably thought I was crazy back there, but
They thought
I
that before they saw you
yeah,
doing it.
probably. Well, you gotta blow my cover, Rich. But had fun with that. And for a couple years I'd always come back to that. But at one point that laptop crashed and I don't own that material anymore. But I still do my shrimp squats. I still do a
Sweet.
lot of the stretching,
Cool. Cool. Cool.
and I follow a lot of the YouTube stuff now. And I
Cool,
like
man.
the YouTube stuff because it's basic, crawling around. Yeah, I
Yeah.
shouldn't say it's basic. I didn't mean to offend you there, but
No,
it's
it is basic. Yeah, that's cool. But keep going, man.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's easy to throw in, and I'm kind of back at that same spot in my life where I like the calisthenics type movements. I like the bear crawls and stuff like that. I am kind of burnt out on the weights again at this
Mm.
point in my life. So really excited to kind of pick your brain on some of that stuff, but that's the through line. And before we hopped on, you told us that you just moved back to the United States after 30 years in Japan. Is that a culture shock for you? I know you've been coming back and forth, seeing family throughout the years, but to be over in Japan for 30 years and now to come back and you're in Kansas, are you like, where am I?
Yeah, more, I mean, more than you could possibly believe. Grew up in Wichita, Kansas, and I left when I was 18 to go to college, and I transferred over to Japan. And so in total, I was there 28 years, so almost 38 years, or pardon me, 30 years. So I just dove right in. And so I went over for martial arts. And so I was there. I actually ended up moving into my instructor's home, and I was a live-in student with him. Um, I didn't speak any English at that time because where I happened to be during that time, there were a few other exchange students, but I happened to be separate from them because I was doing martial arts and they weren't. So there was a time where I wasn't speaking any English at all, just doing kendo, just doing judo. And then I graduated, I moved to Osaka to work, ended up working inside of a martial arts complex, which is located inside of a shrine. And I worked there for 8 years. And I was the interpreter and translator. And so I got to go to the classes throughout the day, and they would beat me up and I would just interpret, because there were some other foreigners that would come in and want to study. But, coming back to your question, I mean, I spent over half of my life in Japan, which is kind of crazy to think about. I turned 52 here pretty quick, and I feel more comfortable in Japan than I do in the United States, even though I'm from the United States. And when I came back to the United States with my family a year and a half ago, dude, I was blown away. I mean, just, of course things change. And that's a given, I mean, we all know that. That's fine. But how they changed and things I forgot about and things that had become so common for me. And give you just a quick example. I walked everywhere in Japan. I spent so much time on the ground simply because, I mean, we didn't sit on the sofa, or, you don't need a car if you live in Osaka. We had one because, my daughter, for her sports, quite far away. And so I would have to take her, but I hardly drove. And I come back to the States, and just the amount of driving everywhere and the lack of walking, simply because you kind of have to, depending on where you live. And the food, I mean, don't even get me started on that. I mean, but it's a change. And I don't want to say that it's good or bad. It simply is. And, it was really interesting for me because it wasn't just reverse culture shock for myself. I got to also look at my children. So they're 16 and 14 right now. And my wife, and they'd never lived in the United States. They visited here, but it's only like a week at a time or something like that. So to actually live here, it's been pretty crazy to watch them change and, have the experience now. Because that's what we wanted for them, is not just to be like in this one place, which unfortunately a lot of people in the world are. And what I just mean is, again, not good or bad. It just is. If you live in the same place your whole life, you think that's the only thing really there is. And the way you look at things can change drastically in a good way, when you have the opportunity to live in different cultures, to be able to speak multiple languages, to be able to learn how to communicate when you can't communicate well because you're still working on your English. This is my kids and my wife. And so, the cool thing about it is both of my kids wrestle, and they couldn't speak English well at all, but they could step on the mat and wrestle. And, they made friends, really close friends, just simply for the fact because it was that physical part of that. And they could express themselves through movement. My daughter was the same. So my daughter, actually, little brag, but she took first place in swimming in the city championships here. And, that was the first thing that she did. It was like a month after we got here. She was on the swim team. She's the shortest girl, smallest girl. She went in there and she couldn't speak English. And the coach didn't want to have anything to do with her that first practice. until she got in the pool. And then my daughter, because it
Google
really upset
Translate
my
came up.
daughter. Yeah, man, I tell you, it was crazy because like my daughter was pretty upset because the coach kind of like blew her off. And so my daughter was like, pfft, and she just got in the pool and just swam. And then everything changed. And so, this is a thing where my entire life has been about movement. That's all I know. It's from when I was little, gymnastics, martial art. And that's all I did. And so, obviously that's going to rub off on my kids. I don't push my kids, by the way. And this is something maybe we can talk about later, but like, I don't actually push my kids to do things. I had that when I was growing up and I didn't want that for my kids. But the thing is when you have kids, they watch you, they do what you do. And, I started a gym in Japan called the Jungle Gym when my kids were still really young. I think my son was 3 and my daughter, I think, was around 5. Maybe they're a little older than that. But I started this gym because I wanted a place for my kids to be able to train. And it was a kids gym. As a matter of fact, that's actually where our program Elements kind of comes from. Was these, animal movements and things like that actually were from my martial art warm-up practices that my instructors would have me do in Japan. And so, lots there that I'm rambling about, but basically coming back to it is like movement. It's an expression, and it can be physical, mental, linguistically. Like there's so much going on there. And so I really, really believe that movement is one way to bring us culturally together, even if we can't speak the same language, if you will. Yeah.
Man, I think that is so fitting for who you are and what you do with GMB, and the fact that your children are able to bridge that gap through movement. A bunch of questions from there, and I know Rich has one, but you said your son wrestles,
Yeah.
and I know you're a
My
judo
daughter too.
guy,
Yeah.
your daughter.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
you're a judo guy. You teaching them those
Yeah.
foot sweeps, you teaching them those throws.
Oh, heck yeah, baby. Yeah. So I'm also a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so, it's like, it's just, I love it so much. And as a matter of fact, here in the house that we have, the reason I chose this house was because of the basement, because the doors, open up into the backyard, but it was a hardwood floor so that I could put down our mats. And so the entire basement is matted out. And so this is, I shoot my videos and stuff there, but I also teach a martial arts class there 4 days a week in the evenings. And my kids, when they get into a little argument with each other and things get heated, my wife and I are like, take it to the mats, and they go down to the mats and they wrestle it out. And so we have certain rules. They're not allowed to punch and do stuff like that. They can wrestle and they could submit, but no chokes and things like that, especially when they're angry. So it's like, but the thing of it is, it's like, because it can get pretty heated, let's be honest.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's really cool because this is another opportunity for me to bond with my kids, physically. And to be perfectly honest, a release for them to be able to, like, again, express themselves in a way where, and to me, this is also extremely important, where they're teaching them a skill that goes beyond just being able to wrestle, just being able to perform or do like judo or jujitsu. It's about confidence. It's about putting themselves in uncomfortable positions and doing things that challenges them, and they're doing it in a way where it's in a positive environment, so those challenges actually become easier to surpass, and they end up building this resilience that I just absolutely love. And so, like, just everything has kind of come together, if you will, since us moving here. We just, they have thrived. I just want to say that, and it's just, and it's not just because, oh, their English is getting better, or I'm a supportive dad, mom is supportive. No, they understand that they do hard things and they understand they can do that. and they get in there and they do it. And I want to say this is kind of like a dad brag. So when my daughter went out for the wrestling team in high school, there was only two other girls on the wrestling team. And so the coach is super supportive, but it's pretty funny because he messaged me and he says, "Is everything okay with your daughter?" He says, "I know that she doesn't speak English very well, but she just, no matter what, I'll tell the kids to do something, she'll smile and she'll do it." And my question to him was, "What's the problem?" And he said, "All the other kids will complain." He says, "I've never heard your daughter complain." And I said, "Well, that's not how they were raised. If you're the coach and you ask them to do something, they're going to do it." And it was funny because his reply was, "Do you have any other kids?" Because, but, it's one of those things. Again, it was like, again, I don't know about accounting. I'm not the best business person in the world, but I do know about movement. I do know how to coach people and support people in a way that's going to help them surpass where they currently are, and do it in a way that's going to help them and keep them from breaking themselves down. And so the thing of that is, I don't think a lot of people realize just how much of my coaching not only has helped me for bringing my kids up, but how much my kids have helped me to become a better coach, if you will. And again, I'm kind of rambling, but this is a great question because nobody's ever asked me this before. And so that's, I think, why I'm just kind of just vomiting, words right now.
It's
So
gold.
yeah.
Is your daughter the oldest, Ryan?
She is. She's my kids, the birthday's in August. My daughter turns 17, and then my son will be 15. They're 2 years and 2 days apart. We didn't plan that. It just happened. So yeah.
Okay. And, like I said, Jimmy and I both come up wrestling and pay attention, and the Japanese women are powerhouse, traditionally, when it comes to women's wrestling freestyle. How did that, and you mentioned that you didn't ever pressure your kids into doing anything. How did, I'm assuming your daughter started wrestling before your son?
No.
Okay.
They started wrestling when they came to the United States. So this is a funny story too. So my kids, growing up, they always did martial arts with me.
Okay.
Whether that be some form of grappling, striking, or whatnot. I'll just throw it out there, and don't think of this as a brag. I just want to kind of like lay the foundation of what's going on. So I have black belts in Kendo, Iaido, Judo, Shorinji Kempo, and then brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so that's all I did. I mean, I went over to Japan to do martial arts. I plan on doing martial arts my entire life. That's like, I know a little bit about GMB. I know a lot more about martial arts. I'll just say that. So, but the kids have always just known that's my thing. And so when they were little, they would come to practice and get on the mat and do the stuff. And my son, at a very young age, just absolutely loved Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. His big thing, he loved to do the armbar, and so that was this thing. But there was a period when they started to grow a little older, and my daughter was on the junior national swim team in Japan, so that was her thing. And so she wasn't really doing too much of the grappling or the martial arts and stuff as she was getting older. We come to the United States, and I honestly have no idea why my son decided, but he came home and he said, "I want to go out for the wrestling team." And I just went, yes, like, this is like, I was trying to be cool about it, like, "Oh, that sounds good. Yeah, great." But inside I was like, yeah, just freaking out. My wife too. So I need to say my son is extremely timid. And so my wife, and he'd never competed in any sport in his entire life. So this is when he was, he's turning 15. So he was 13 at the time, right? Never competed in any sport, just hates competition or whatever like that. And he's like, "I want to go out for the wrestling team." And we're like, "Okay, cool." And my wife and I actually, privately, we're like, "All right, let's support him, no matter what, just let him know it's all good, no matter, it's all good." Goes out for the wrestling team, and this is in middle school. And first time wrestling ever. wins every single match. Every single match. And again, it's not a brag. It's just like, where did this come from, sort of thing. And realized what it was is he already had the movements because he'd been doing this kind of stuff with me for so long. He's been doing the GMB type stuff, which are these animal movements and what. So he's comfortable getting down on the ground, getting back up, jumping around, doing all this other stuff. And after every practice, he would come home and he would ask me a question because, again, he was working on his English because he couldn't speak English at all. He would come home and he was like, Daddy, like this, coach is talking about this, I don't understand. And we would end up spending a good hour, even after practice, after he'd come home, get on the mats, and he and I would do more training stuff. And this went on, the whole season. Well, afterwards, he was like, hey, I want to join the club team, right? So, what is it, like 2 or 3 months as a season in the middle school? And then you got the club year-round team. So he joined that, lost every single match until his very last match. Well, it was the second to the last match of the season. He won that, so he got to go on to the next match. And I tell you what, the coolest thing wasn't that he won all of the middle school matches. It was that he kept going during club and he won that single match. My wife and I are just thrilled. But what I'm getting at is, again, if I were to put pressure on him and expect him to perform a certain way or say you have to do something or whatnot, then I don't think that would have happened. This was a conscious decision upon his part. And I simply helped him, if you will, in the way that he wanted to be helped. And I think that this is actually, and I'm not talking myself up, by the way, or anything like that. It's just, this is what I've learned over the years, is that a lot of coaches actually put too much pressure on the child to perform instead of helping that child to perform in a way in which the child wants to perform so that they can perform better. And so one thing that we always talk about, at least I do, and I just finished writing an article on this that'll be published this weekend on my personal blog, which is called gyukai.com, which is all about martial arts, separate from GMB. And it's called just step on the mat. And what it is there's going to be days where you don't feel like doing something. Okay, cool. That's fine. Just at least step on the mat. It doesn't mean that we expect you to crush it that day or do something like that, but just step on the mat. And instead of saying, okay, today I've got to nail this, or I've got to submit a certain number of people or something like that, instead of looking at it that way, simply go, okay, do the practice and then say, what did I learn today? And if you can say okay, what did you learn? Even if you lost, even if you felt you had a quote unquote crappy practice, it doesn't matter as long as you learn something. Because if you learn something, that means you can apply that to the next one, which means that you'll never have a bad practice session. And so that's all we did with him. And it was pretty cool because we didn't put any pressure on him. He just felt like going. And we just told him, it was hey man, listen, just show up. Just show up. You determine how you're going to do that practice that day, but just show up, okay? And of course, we all know that if you show up and you do the warm-ups, you're going to stick around. You're going to do the stuff. And that's what gets you actually better. That's what keeps you improving. But if you put that pressure on yourself to think you have to be 100% every single practice, well, one, you're not going to be. It's physically impossible, mentally impossible to do that. But if you reframe the way you look at it and just say, what did I learn? Well, then 100% physically and mentally, you do have a good practice. So that's all we did with him. And let's still continue to do that with the both of them because they still, wrestle and swim and play tennis. So, yeah.
Ryan, you are hitting all the Airey Bros mottos, all our bullet points, but Rich and I, our big thing and a reason why this podcast is where it is right now is one of our mottos is 80% of success is just showing up. And one thing we can do and wrestle and Ryan taught us was how to show up. And then another thing you brought up, and it's a common theme, the more we talk to these really good coaches and good programs, college programs, attitude and effort, right?
Yes.
And that's the common theme, I would say, of the past, I don't know, Rich, what, 30 episodes, 50 episodes? And it's the common theme. And Rich and I always say man, how much enjoyable would our athletic careers have been if we just graded ourselves on our attitude and effort? Because I said to him, I was like, how many times you don't think the attitude and effort wasn't there? He was like,
Oh
maybe
God,
once,
dude.
maybe twice. Like for the most part,
Yeah.
you're showing up. You want to do the best you
Yes.
can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's funny you bring that up. I mean, and in this article that again that's going out this weekend, the example I gave was it's crazy, man. Like white boy from Wichita, Kansas gets to train inside of a literal castle in Osaka, Japan. So there's the Osaka castle inside of that. There's a martial arts complex, and they have these practices where as long as you're a black belt in judo, you can go to these certain practices. And so I had the opportunity to go. Um, and there were days, and I would go twice a week. There were days that I would be outside of the door and be like, I'm just not feeling it today. I think maybe I'll just, take a break. Or I'm still sore from yesterday, and I was looking kind of for an excuse to like not go in. But it was funny because and this is where just step on the mat, my kind of, mantra came from was like, dude, no one else gets this experience. Shut up, step on the mat. And so that was, man, I was in my 20s, during that time. And like, that's kind of when things changed for me because I was putting so much pressure on myself because I wasn't Japanese, because I felt that I had to prove myself, because of all this other stuff that I was actually losing the enjoyment of it. And then I remember when I started changing it and being like, hey, dude, just shut up, step on the mat, man. You get to do this. You don't have to do it. You get to do it. That changed a whole lot, man. And that's still how it is for me now. I don't obviously train at the intensity, or I'm not even at the level I used to be. Perfectly fine with that, by the way. But the thing of it is, I still get to step on the mat and I still get to wrestle with my kids, or other people. And I don't know, man. It's just that one of those things where I think if you can just make that reframe and look at your attitude and the effort you're putting in there, and not just on the mat, I think this for everything in life. And I think there's so many people out there who just end up being really negative. And I'm not saying you should be positive all the time. But the big thing for me is just don't be negative, because again, we get to do this stuff. And if you decide you want to do it, then just show up, do the thing.
Ryan, I got one more martial art question for you, and then I'm sure he
Yeah.
wants to get more into the fitness stuff. But coming from a martial arts background in jiu-jitsu and judo, having that with your kids and them taking on wrestling and probably having to learn some new techniques and some new
Yeah.
things when you're working with them or you're breaking them down or maybe helping them with the coaching from the coaches with the language and stuff, are you seeing like little things with techniques from the folk style wrestling and seeing how you can incorporate judo or jujitsu and maybe innovating certain things? Because I know as a wrestling coach, wrestling kids that just know how to wrestle, but
Uh-huh.
also from jujitsu being comfortable on my back, I can fight from different positions and not give up as much, where they think they've got me, but I
Right.
but I'm not afraid to necessarily like be in that position on my back and I know I can get
Yeah.
them and use it. Are you teaching that sort of stuff?
So I love this question. So um, I've always been a top player. So my big thing is always be on top. That's just it. Like, and my instructor in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu actually is his game is a bottom game. And so when goodness, I think it was like the first year of my purple belt, he only let me play bottom because he's like, you got to get good on bottom. And then when I got my brown belt, he said, okay, man, he said, I want you just to do your own style because he knew where it was going. And it's coming to your question. So obviously, judo guy, competed many, many, many years, pretty much every single weekend in judo, loved it. Broke my body, but I loved it. But when I went into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it was just completely different for me in the sense that I had a good instructor who was trying to fill in some of the gaps that I had. Now, when I came to the United States a year and a half ago, scouted out a few Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gyms, and I went in, and Wichita, Kansas, right? Everyone's a wrestler. And there's two ways you can look at this. Oh, crap, I'm not a wrestler. Or, hell yeah, I get to start working on some wrestling defenses for that and see how my judo does against wrestling. And that's how I went into it. And the cool thing about that is that I've actually completely changed my grappling game. So last month in June, I was in Japan the entire month of June with my family. And of course, every week I was training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with my group back there. And they were just like, dude, you're a different person. And the difference was I had the opportunity to go up against wrestlers and actually incorporate, like you just said, a lot of the things that I learned via the wrestling. More importantly, though, how to defend against the wrestling, but then also looking at how to always be on top, which is I like anyway. Okay. So the way, though, that I look at things, and this goes for GMB as well, is I don't focus on techniques. I focus on the underlying concepts that make those techniques. So this is why, for example, it doesn't matter, like if we're looking at wrestling and let's say, most people will go, okay, this is the technique for a single leg, or this is the technique to defend the single leg or something like that. What's the concept that you need to look at? And it's across the board for everything. Keep your elbows in, keep your posture, and keep them away from your red zones, which are the back of your knees, your torso, and the back of your neck, right? So that 3 red zones. And so I always look at things just like that. And this is how I explain this to my kids in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Jiu-Jitsu, however you want to call it. And also wrestling is I say, hey, listen, let's just focus on the 3 red zones, keeping people out of your red zones. Again, the back of the knees, looking from hips to the armpits, and the back of the neck. If you can keep people away from there, you're doing great. And so by just doing that, stuff that they already knew about before from when they were doing gi and no gi grappling, it made it a lot easier for them. So then it was just easy to say, okay, these are the rule sets now. And so therefore, this is a particular goal to look for. For example, pin them, just get their back on the ground. Didn't look at any techniques. All I did was like the concept is get their back on the ground. And so then we would play and we say, we're going to start in this position. The person who's, A, goal is to get this person's back on the ground. Person B, don't let your back touch the ground. And so, I mean, it's just a simple concept, but the way to do that is control their red zones, keep them out of your red zones. And so there's the little things that we did. And then from there, when the coach was explaining a technique, it would make sense to the kids because then they would understand some of the concepts behind. The other thing, like, for example, I like to say a lot, make a hole, fill the hole. And all that is, for example, in order to throw a person, if they have a post, then they can use that to frame and you can't throw them in that way. But if you remove that post, you've now created a hole, put them in that hole. And so that way you're not saying, all right, here's a 15-step technique. Instead, I say, get rid of the frame or post and then make that hole and put them in the hole. And then the opposite would be to, fill that hole and step away. So concepts and things like that are something that I really focus on a lot, especially with kids. And, adults, great, but a lot of the adults, they overthink things and they want to get very technical instead of just being like, hey, listen, you got to get in there and actually spend the time training this live, and just focusing on getting some reps in, but doing it in a safe manner. And so this is also why like constraint learning is a huge thing that I'm just big proponent of, is sometimes, I mean, you might say what situational sparring. I think people call it that sometimes, but do that in wrestling a lot too. And a lot of games and things I think are really great because it keeps the focus there without having it so broad that they don't get the opportunity to practice that particular movement over and over and over again, which I think a lot of times in free sparring, free rolling, I think it's great. It's a lot of fun, but the more time you can spend focusing on a particular concept with that AB winner loser, if you will, you get a lot of reps in, quality reps, because we all know that the technique is never going to be the same ever, you know? And so it's always going to be slightly different depending on the intensity, the effort, the movement of the person, the height, the weight, whatever. And so, long answer to your question, but I've just had this great experience of coming from Japan, doing judo and these other arts, and being thrown into something completely new of wrestling that I didn't have any experience in, except for the however 1 or 2 semesters that we were required to do here in Wichita, Kansas when I was in high school. So yeah, I mean, I could talk about this forever because like this, I love it. But hopefully that answered a little bit of it,
Absolutely.
So
I'm curious, with all that being said, and with your body of work, have any of the wrestling coaches asked you to come into the wrestling room yet and help out?
So I actually, so I've actually, And it's interesting because it's not so much technique as, again, like the concepts, because for me, my background in like being able to use those games, if you will, to condition an athlete um, and keep them from getting injured. And that is huge because my daughter unfortunately did get injured. And they thought she might have needed surgery. They thought she needed surgery on her knee. Luckily, she didn't have that surgery, but she was still able to train. And the way she was able to train was, instead of training at the high school, she trained with me. And then she went back and the coach was like, what's going on? And that's when the coach realized, I don't go and tell anybody what I do. I'm not going to be one of those parents who are like, here's my opinion, even though I'm not the coach. I just shut up and do my thing. But yes, the wrestling team, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym has asked me to teach classes there. And then as well, the swimming team has asked me to become their conditioning coach, which is kind of cool. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, so, man, I never thought we would be this far into the episode, and
sorry.
This is amazing. You are right in our wheelhouse. I feel sorry that we haven't got into GMB, but you're talking some things that I want to touch on, and you mentioned concepts, and it took till I was a purple belt, and I had a professor that was really into teaching some Hickson Gracie concepts and got all down that. And then I realized my whole wrestling career, I didn't have a move set. I had a concepts for everything. And then my whole world kind of exploded. And so I'm kind of curious to get into some of the concepts of GMB and how you kind of bring that to your movement approach, and not every workout maybe, being the same, or like you said, you get on the mat. Some days it's 15 minutes, some days it's 45 minutes, but what kind of concepts do you try to incorporate when you're in your movement practice?
Yeah, this is great. So, originally GMB, we didn't quite have the methodology down. And so over the years, we've been doing this for a little over 15 years officially in GMB. And so right now our method is pretty solid. So just first and foremost, we're always wanting to look at auto-regulation. And so auto-regulation being, just because something looks good on paper doesn't mean it's what you need that day. And so there always needs to be micro adjustments according to what your body is truly telling you. Now, again, this isn't like, oh, I don't feel like doing this today, so I think I'm going to skip my workout. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about yesterday was too much. Today, I need this. That's what I'm talking about. And that's a macro way of looking at it, of course. But it could be anything from, for example, looking at my daughter when she hurt her knee. Just because today it says that she needs to do something, by all means, she shouldn't be doing that thing. So what can we do? And that's what auto regulation is. It doesn't mean skipping your workout. It means figuring out what you need that day, both physically and mentally. And that's very important as well, because they're kind of one and the same. Yes, separate, but they're dependent upon each other. So you could be down, feeling bad because you have a slight injury. All right, shut up, get on the mat, do what you can do, and that will change everything. And as long as you're doing what you can do, you're making improvements, you're getting better. And it's not just physically, but it's also going to be a mental process as well. And so these are just little tiny steps that we need to take. So auto regulation is something that the more we can do and understand how to do that, the better off we will be. So we also have auto regulation within movements. Let me give the shrimp squat, because you mentioned shrimp squat earlier, as an example. So let's say during one set of our shrimp squat, well, let me back up. Let's say that you can perform a full shrimp squat where you're holding onto your foot all the way down and all the way up. And let's say that I ask you to do that for 1 minute straight. Now, the sets and reps, by the way, we don't really focus on sets and reps. It's more on time based. And the reason why is if you focus just on sets and reps all the time, you get focused on thinking you need to hit those sets and reps rather than bringing awareness to your body and making each and every rep count. So that's why we're always wanting to focus more so on time and focus on strength endurance, because that's going to be a better carryover for the types of things that we're doing, whether that be martial arts, whether that be real life or whatever. Now, if we're looking at, barbell type stuff, that's a different topic. But if we're looking at body weight, then we have found that time-based training tends to work better and the mental side of things as well. So let's say we're on that shrimp squat and we have it set for a minute. We're going to do a minute on one leg. And you do a rep and it's really nice and clean. You get to the top and you go back down, and right away you start to feel that it's getting tough. You slowly go back up. Now the next one, you can go down while holding onto your leg, but you're having trouble standing up. Cool, let go. Stand up, push out of that. And then grab your foot again to see if you can slowly lower yourself. You can, but about halfway down, your legs is getting tough, so you can let go. But you still continue to do that shrimp squat. And then you start modifying this, but you continue to do it. So by doing this, you're able to have these little micro adjustments as you go, but you still keep going. And the thing of this is that it's still going to improve your strength. It's still going to improve your endurance. Mentally, it's also going to keep you going, because you're not going to feel that you failed because you couldn't get that variation of the shrimp squat for X amount of reps for 1 minute. And so the other thing to take into consideration is the fact that our bodies are not equal. So you might be able to do something on your right leg, but on the left leg might not be as great. So the thing is, though, if you can adjust that, that's great. That's what that side needs today. And so this is where auto regulation in a micro sense can come in, where we're making these micro adjustments and making sure that we're good for that day, for what we need. So that's one. So the other thing that we have is the AAA framework. So the AAA framework is basically where we assess where we're at, we address the issues that we have, and we apply the proper protocol for that thing. And so the concept here again is looking at auto regulation, but it's actually how you do this by assessing where you're at. Let's be honest, a lot of us let ego get in the way, and maybe you want to impress somebody, I don't even know, okay, but you might be doing something that's not really the best thing for you at the moment. But if you can truly assess and say, okay, this is where I'm at, that's a good thing, because you can always get better from there. Well, then when you address it and say, okay, why? What's going on here? It might be a strength issue, could be a mobility issue, it could be a control issue. Now, the control component of this, you don't hear a whole lot of that in a lot of the fitness world, if you will. I mean, you do, but not in the sense that we're talking about where, like, do you actually have your balance? Do you actually have the wherewithal to be able to stop at any point in that movement with control? So, looking at those three components, it's a strength issue, it's going to be a mobility issue, or it's going to be a control issue, or a combination of those. And once you understand what's going on there, then you apply the proper protocol. What do you need for that? And so this is where GMB comes in. And so that, my business partner, Jarl Alano, Doctor of Physical Therapy, that comes from his many, many years of working with thousands of patients. And we're not trying to be physical therapists in GMB. We're trying to create these concepts and protocols for people to be able to, again, assess, address, and apply for themselves, bring better awareness to their body so that we truly know what we need and we can use auto-regulation in a way that's going to benefit us, instead of blindly going through and doing a program that's written on a piece of paper that somebody, well, let me say it this way. You don't want to do the program that I do for myself. And I'm not saying that I'm better than any of you at all. No, that was for me. And so what we need to do is figure out what's going to be good for us. And so this could mean that the two of you need to be maybe doing more than what I'm doing. Maybe you need to use a more difficult variation of the movement that I'm using. So just because, again, I'm doing something doesn't mean that it's going to be the best for you. So, other concepts we have in terms of, maybe not just concepts, but things to think about all the time is, how does it feel? How does it feel? There is a time where you need to push through and you really need to push yourself. But how does it feel? Like, is this a good thing? A lot of us will do something and know it's probably not good, but keep doing it. And this is how we can get injured. It's, martial arts are the same way. When you're rolling with somebody and it's going a bit overboard, but you're like, nah, I'll just stick with it. And then something pops or whatever, you know what I mean? So yeah, we've been there.
Yeah.
But coming back to GMB again, we also have our protocol for our sessions, and I can talk about that real quick if you want. And that's just where we have the 5 Ps. And this is how we look at how we actually work out, if you will. I don't like to say work out. We say practice, because we feel that everything is a skill. And if you look at it through the lens of practicing a skill, you're always going to get better. So we start off with a prep, and the prep is preparing our joints for the thing that we're going to be practicing. And so it could be, for working on handstands or something, then we want to make sure that we prepare our wrists, our shoulders, what we need in order to get us practicing that particular thing. The practice is not the workout at all. Practice is where we're performing a particular movement at the highest level we can, with the highest level of form that we can. So an example here would be, maybe depending on where you are with your handstand, trying or doing a handstand the best that you can, coming out of it, giving yourself a good break, shaking things off. When you're ready, do another one. And again, we're not looking at numbers, we're looking at a duration of time. So let's say, like the prep, it's a 5-minute prep, let's say, and there's 5 movements for that prep that you do for 1 minute each. Then you can say, all right, I'm going to give myself 15 minutes to practice the handstand. You don't want to be the Energizer Bunny and just keep kicking up there and try and do the handstand for 15 minutes. No, you're going to do the handstand. You take a break, do another one, and then 15 minutes comes around and you're like, okay, cool. If you want to do a couple more, cool, do a couple more. That's fine. Maybe 5 minutes in and you're like, not feeling it today. Cool. Move on to the next thing. So this is where you can auto regulate your session that day. Now, the next one is play. You don't find this. I haven't really noticed it in any other fitness programs before, but we have play. Play simply means taking a movement and exploring it. And we can come back to that handstand and we could say, maybe during practice, you could hold like a really nice 5-second handstand. It's really nice. You've been working on this for a really long time. Play, what you can do is go to the wall and you can start experimenting with the position of your head. Now, what we did here is we used a variation of the handstand that we're already comfortable with. And we actually took it down so that we're playing with this particular head position in a safe manner with our feet against the wall. Because when we bring ourselves out of alignment, that's where things, can happen if we're not careful. So play, that's just an example, but we always want to play at a level that we're extremely comfortable with because we're exploring different options of that movement. That could be like maybe 5 minutes, let's say. Now, the next part, though, is push. And this is typically where the majority of everyone lives. This is a workout. This is literally where you push yourself. And so this is where I mentioned earlier, like the shrimp squat, where you might set the timer. You'll do a circuit. I know it's a little different from the handstand, but let's say you're doing a circuit. The circuit is, let's say you start off with 45 seconds of, standard push-up, done as perfectly as you possibly can for 45 seconds without stopping. After that, shake things off, 45 seconds of chin-ups. Then you're going to go into shrimp squats and then maybe finish off with 45 seconds of a hollow body hold. Okay, simple little circuit. But the thing is, you do maybe 3 to 5 rounds of that. Now, as you're going through that, maybe in that first round, you can get, 45 seconds chin-ups. But what's going to probably happen is you're going to start getting tired. So does that mean you stop doing the chin-ups? Or maybe you just modify them. And so instead of doing a full chin-up, what you could do is jump halfway, pull up, slowly lower. It's not cheating at all. It's you maintaining good form, focusing on the concept of when you're performing a chin-up to keep your elbows pulled in, shoulders pulled back and down, core tight, legs together. These concepts are what you're focusing on, the cues that I teach when I'm teaching programs. And those concepts within those cues are what is going to help you to get stronger, improve mobility while you're working on that movement, as well as the control needed. That's all going to carry over down the road for whatever it is that you're doing. And so, again, this is where you're making these auto regulation, micro adjustments as you're working through this and just getting better. We finish off with ponder. Now, ponder is the mental side of things. Let's take a couple seconds. How'd the session go? What did you have trouble with? What do you need to work on? What felt good? What do you need to do for tomorrow's session? So these are the 5 P's that we have. And again, other concepts are what I mentioned, the cues, where I don't overcoach. If we're looking at one movement, I'm going to give you one cue. One. If you're upside down, I'm not going to, tell you, point your toes, straighten your legs, squeeze your butt, push with your hand, pull your head. No, there's too much going on in there. I'm going to tell you one single thing to focus on and have you get really good at that. And when you get that down, maybe next time you do your handstand, we'll come back to it and focus on the next cue. And that's also how I teach martial arts and everything as well. Because if I'm throwing out a bunch of different stuff at you, you're not going to remember the thing that I mentioned 5 cues ago. So, focus on that one thing, get really good at it. Make sure that you understand that this exists everywhere and play around with that. So one example, by the way, could be if you're doing the bear, and the bear movement for, those of you listening, have your hands and your knees and your toes on the ground. So your shoulders are over your hands, your hips are over your knees, And all you're going to do is push your butt up into the air. And this is called an A frame. The reason why is because your butt's in the air, your hands are on the ground, your feet are on the ground, and it looks like an A position. Now from there, just walk forward and walk backward. Okay, that's the bear walk. Now, I could give you any number of things to focus on, like splaying your fingers, pushing away from the ground, screwing the elbow pits forward, making sure to try and push your heels down to the floor. Or I could tell you one single thing: push your butt up into the air. That single cue actually fixes all the stuff that I mentioned earlier. And so by focusing on a single cue and making sure that that cue is hitting the concepts and the things that we want to get out of that particular movement, we've solved a lot of problems there. We've kept it easy for our athlete. We've kept it extremely easy for them to remember later on. And because they only have a single focus, then next we can also add in, little things like, as they push their butt up into the air, I tell them to smile. Why? Because if you smile, you're not going to be pursing your lips and grimacing and tensing up. And so it also helps because when people smile, they tend to have more fun. So, there's a whole lot of stuff going on in there, I know, but concepts again are something that I really want to focus more on instead of actual techniques and trying to overburden people with these little tiny things. When if you give them a single thing to focus on and let them explore and figure it out themselves, they're gonna figure it out. They're also going to feel better. And we're not putting them in a box thinking that they should be doing it the exact way that I do, because I want everyone just to find their own style, if you will. And, by saying that things have to be exactly like me, that's not a good expression of oneself.
Ryan, I wish someone would have told me as a young coach, hey, just focus on one cue instead of, a million things. That would have made my life a lot easier and my athlete's life a lot easier. So I really appreciate that. Ryan, I want to be super respectful of your time. We have the final four, but I want to ask one more question if Rich doesn't have anything for you. But you mentioned that once the wrestling coaches, started to know who you were and what you do, they asked you to come in and help with the conditioning. And a lot of the coaches we talk to, a lot of the wrestlers we talk to, a lot of them dabble in CrossFit, have CrossFit backgrounds, CrossFit HQ, and we're of the same opinion. A lot of those guys that for strength and conditioning, CrossFit is one of the best strength and conditioning protocols. But I also know that GMB and gymnastics training is a great strength and conditioning protocol. And you had mentioned your daughter and your son never wrestled, but because their movement practices, they were able to come in and do pretty well. So, in your opinion, why should wrestlers, combat athletes do gymnastics, play around with GMB, and how could it benefit those sports?
It's actually pretty easy for me. And the answer is, the better you move, the better you know your body. Therefore, the better you can use your body against someone else's body. That's it. And so you can always stack strength and conditioning on top of it. But if you don't move well, then sorry, you're stacking crap. Now, I know that sounds pretty bad. But again, the better you move and understand how you move, the better you will move under pressure. And so that's why I feel that movement is so important. And I'm not just talking about, oh, you just got to move. I don't even mean that. I'm talking about movements that relate to the task. I think that's very important.
I got two things. One, Ryan, I'm a physical education teacher, and so I just want to thank you for your time tonight, because you have absolutely fired me up for school starting next week and getting back with the kids and
thank you.
giving them what real physical education should be, and teaching them how to move their bodies and utilize their bodies and be healthy. So I got really fired up just sitting here listening to you talk about it and how passionate you are. The other thing, and Jimmy will back me on this. I've been saying this to my friends as I've gotten older. Friends, they get married, they start having kids. I tell them three things: gymnastics, swimming, martial arts. And it seems like you're on that wavelength with me.
100% agree.
And so, what I want to
Yes.
ask specifically with your martial arts background and as extensive as it is, do you think that there's one particular martial art that you would recommend to narrow down that focus for younger kids starting off and then maybe branching from there?
You know what? It's kind of weird for me to say, but maybe not after our chat. I would actually change that a little bit. And instead of saying martial arts, I would say wrestling. And I have yet, judo is kind of similar, but again, different. But I have yet to find a wrestler who does another martial art and doesn't do well in it. And the reason for it is this: gymnastics, I believe, teaches you extreme body awareness in space. I believe that swimming gives you a great feel for your body suspended, if you will, because you're in water. I know you're not suspended, but whereas wrestling teaches you grit, determination, and drive because of the conditioning, because of being pinned, because of all the things. And some people might say, well, jiu-jitsu does the same. But I would argue that wrestling has a system behind it that's been around, for quite a while, in the sense that if you look at the Olympic athletes of wrestlers, those are some of the best conditioned people in the world, period. And the kids, the 5-year-olds, the 6-year-olds that start off in wrestling and even just stick with it for a few years, they're going to be better off in other sports because they'll know how to listen to a coach. They'll know how to put their chin down, get in there and do the work. And I've got to be honest, in a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu places, it's a hit and a miss depending on where you go. And that might upset a few people, but I don't mind upsetting a few people. It's my opinion. But I really believe nowadays that, I'm so happy that my kids wrestled. Just so happy. And even if they never wrestle again, it's fine, because the 1 year of them wrestling has just really, really helped them to build that. And I think it's very important in my mind for kids to have that. Kids who don't have that physical, like, toughness, if you will, in competitions like that, I can't say that they won't do well, of course, but I think that kids would do better, be a lot tougher, complain less, and actually take better care of their bodies if they were to do gymnastics, swim, and wrestle when they were young. Just my opinion. Yeah.
Oh, you just gave us an amazing clip. Would you consider wrestling a martial art?
Yes, I do, because it's from catch wrestling.
Yeah.
And so, the only difference between freestyle is that it doesn't have the submissions, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it comes from catch. So catch is, catch can, catch is, what is it? I know I just screwed that up, but
no, you got it right.
Catch is one can. Is that right? Yeah.
Catch is catch can.
I forgot, from England, right? And what is it?
Billy
Abraham
Robinson.
Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln, he was a catch wrestler, I mean, it's a natural thing for us. And so, this is just one of those things where it's so funny. I come to the United States after being in Japan for so long, and I've really gone deep into wrestling and studied a lot of it. And I just I think it's really great. I really do. I'm not saying that I want to get on the mats and compete, but I do enjoy it a lot. And I think that again, when there is a good coach, luckily, like my kids have, I think it's just a real positive thing. Yeah.
So Ryan, sorry,
Hold
Rich.
on, I got one more.
All right.
I almost forgot this one. Ryan, you said you're from Wichita, yeah?
Yes.
Originally?
Yes.
Did you happen to go to Wichita East High School?
My mom did. I went to Wichita Southeast.
Okay.
Yes.
Are you familiar with Jim Ryan?
Jim Ryan? Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. Well, I believe was he Navajo? Is that correct?
That's Billy Mills.
That's Billy Mills.
So
Jim Ryan
Ryan
was he was a senator, but he was a first American high school athlete to break 4 minutes in the mile. Went to University of Kansas.
Yes, and the reason I ask is because I know of him, and for some reason I also thought that he had Indian blood in him as well.
He might.
Could be wrong. Could be wrong.
I would
Sorry.
defer to the person from Wichita.
Yeah. No, yes, he's very famous here, as is Barry Sanders. Yes. So, and I'm not an American football
We are
follower, so that's about all I have right there as far as football.
So
Yeah,
Ryan, I
that's
must
cool.
make a comment. You have that silver play button behind you, and
Oh, that's from that's however many years ago. That was a very long time ago. Yes. Yes. YouTube for surpassing certain number of subscribers. Yes.
100,000.
Yes.
I am very envious, as Rich will tell you. I talk about that silver play button all the time. That is one of my big goals. And
I will give it to you. You want mine? I'll give it to you.
I want
It's
my
yours.
own.
I'll send it to you.
I want to earn one. I want my own. But when you started GMB, you really didn't try to be a content creator, and you didn't like talking at all. You didn't
I hated
like
it.
hearing your own voice.
Absolutely hated it, dude. Yeah.
You have any tips for people who are making content, who are kind of starting off, and they kind of feel like they got that Bambi leg underneath them, and they're
Yeah,
just
man.
kind of shaky, not making it happen? You have any advice?
Oh, you betcha. And so the thing is, so we've got what's called the apprenticeship. GMB apprenticeship is our where we create our trainers, and it's 3 to 4 month long ordeal. And we actually talk about this in there. I talk about in there because it's not just about helping them to be able to teach GMB. It's actually helping them to create their brand, their business, and the advice is this: be you. That's all there is. Don't try to be somebody else. But the other advice I give is to look at it like you're learning a new language. So, when I first was learning Japanese, I did this. And this is also how I learned Spanish. But what it is in the beginning, find someone that you admire and say, oh, wow, I like how they present. I like how they speak, whatever. And then start to copy them and start to think, okay, not word for word or anything like that, but just like, why do you admire that person? Start to feel that, start to be that way. Okay. But it's still going to be you. Okay. It's got to be real. I'm not trying to say be fake. But by using that as an example, it would actually help to bring those nerves down a bit. And then you just practice and you talk about the things that you're good at talking about. And by doing that, it just becomes natural. Now, when we first started off in GMB, you said it. I just was so nervous in front of the camera. I hated being in front of the camera. There were certain words and phrases that I used that Andy and Jarlo would help me and say, hey man, you need to stop saying that. This was also because at that time I wasn't speaking a whole lot of English. So I was still because I had 2 gyms in Japan and I only spoke in Japanese. So it was teaching all in Japanese. And so my English was all over the place. But what I'm getting at though is, okay, find your voice, I guess what I'm trying to say. But the only way to do that is just like when you're learning a language, You just don't come out of the womb speaking. You mimic and you imitate others until you get a grasp of that. And then later it starts becoming your own voice. And so, again, that is one way that you can look at it. But the other is this, and it's like everything else out there. The more of the thing you do, the more comfortable you get at it. And that's it. And so what I always recommend people, if you want to get better at talking on camera, every single day, set up your camera and shoot a video. Doesn't mean you post it to YouTube or anything like that. Shoot that video, talk about something, okay? Give yourself 5 minutes, then go back and watch that video. If it makes you feel uncomfortable, then why did it make you feel uncomfortable? And if there is something you notice that you can change, go ahead and make a change. But the other thing is this, you're never going to feel comfortable listening to your own voice. So the faster you can get comfortable listening to your own voice means the more comfortable you're going to be in front of the camera. So the other bit of advice I give to some people is that you're not talking to the world. You're talking to a single person. And you're making this video because you want to help that person. That's it. And if you can think about that, if you're coaching a group of 20 kids, talk to them as if you're talking to a single kid and you want them so badly to get better. You want to help them. Do that, and it'll come across not only genuine, because it will be genuine, but also it'll be easier for you. You're going to find your flow and things are just going to happen. And so now that's just what I do is, when I'm talking to right now the camera, I'm talking to you two, but I know other people are listening. But it's, we're just having a conversation. And if you can think about it that way, it just makes things a whole lot easier.
Thank you for that, Ryan.
I hope that helps.
Non-stop gold tonight.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's a couple times in this podcast I wanted to stand up and give you an ovation. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Final four, Rich?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Ryan, are you a coffee drinker?
I don't think I can be friends with people who don't drink coffee. So Amen. I'll just leave it at that.
How do you brew your coffee and how do you take it?
Espresso. Single shot espresso in the morning in my teeny tiny cup. That's it. Right. Black and bitter.
Let's go.
Ryan, do you have any daily practices or rituals you do on a regular basis to show up as the strongest version of Ryan Hurst?
Every single morning, I do Zazen. I sit and I do my meditation. I also focus on making sure that no matter where I am, I focus on my posture. Those are my two things. I've done a lot of different things throughout the years, but those are the two things that I've just always focused on. I sit and I do my meditation in the morning. And then throughout the day, I always bring awareness back to my posture. And by the way, for those of you listening, there isn't a single posture. There's many, many different postures depending on what you're doing at the moment. But I'm always thinking, what is the posture I need at this particular moment? So those are my two rituals. Yeah.
Awesome.
Ryan, what are you listening to right now? Music, podcasts, audiobooks? Are you reading anything?
Oh, yeah, man. So I don't watch TV. I read a lot. As far as music, it's kind of funny because my kids also like it as well. And we were working out we actually went to the gym today together. And on the car over there, we were listening to Stone Temple Pilots and, getting things going. It's great because my kids know the lyrics to a lot of the songs. I don't know why, haha. But, I love Stone Temple Pilots. And today we're listening to them on the way over there. As far as reading, it's funny you mentioned Zen already, but I'm going back and reading the 3 Pillars of Zen. And it's, oh my goodness gracious, I cannot believe I forgot his name. I could look it up real quick, but the 3 pillars of Zen. And I'm always reading 3 books, kind of at once. I have my study book, if you will. And right now, that's my study book. I have my work related book, which is, I guess you'd say, kind of study, but it's obviously to help me with work, and to be a better whatever it is I need to be with work. And then I have a Turn My Brain Off book. And the Turn My Brain Off book that I'm reading right now is called, I believe it's Agent 17. It's this spy kind of like a silly book that I'm reading. So, yes, there you go.
Cool. Ryan, here's a little fun fact for you. You mentioned you're a fan of Stone Temple Pilots.
Yeah.
Jimmy and I went to the same high school as Rob and Dean DeLeo,
No.
albeit at a much different time. But
Yeah, I was
yes,
gonna say, yeah,
they are.
dude, that's super cool.
They are graduates of Point Pleasant Borough High School, where Jimmy and I went, and
Wow.
their mother was friends with our aunt, and we have twin cousins who have a picture when they were babies with Rob and Dean.
That's super cool, dude. That's really cool. Yeah. Man.
So
yeah, it's kind of crazy. Yeah, today that was kind of the theme, Stone Temple Pilots. Yeah. So that's cool to hear, man.
Yeah, that was like the cool thing to do, like junior, senior year in high school when they kind of popped in like 93, 94. We would go down to the library and get the yearbooks and flip through them and find them in the yearbooks.
That's super cool. That is very cool.
Last one we have for you, Ryan.
Yeah.
Do you have a guilty pleasure or guilty pleasures? Could be food, maybe like a warm sake. You've got a daughter, maybe you're a Swiftie.
Yes. Tequila, man. I love tequila. I really do. I don't. Okay. In Japan and doing martial arts in Japan, there's this kind of fine line of, are you a black belt in martial arts or a black belt in drinking? That's just kind of how it goes in Japan, you know? So quick story. I remember the very first year I was in Japan and I was in school. I was doing with the Kendo group I was with. I was very lucky because I got to train with the Japan Self-Defense Force and the police. And after every single practice, they would go out and go drinking. And I honestly thought I was becoming an alcoholic. I was just like, oh my God, but that's just the part of the culture over there. Recently, don't drink that much. I like to sip tequila, but I absolutely love tequila. So there you go. Yeah.
Cool. Straight margarita, just
straight,
okay.
Straight, man. Yep. Nice. Just like my espresso, man. Just put it in there, sip it. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome.
Ryan, thank you so much for your time tonight. This was an amazing conversation, and you got me feeling like the ultimate warrior, shaking the ropes. I am stoked. I am pumped. Rich, I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. I know our fans will.
Ryan, it was an honor and a pleasure to meet you and have a awesome conversation. And again, sometimes we one of the things we like to do here is present guests with a unique conversation with our guests that maybe they have not gotten out of some of the other podcasts that they have been on. So hopefully you got that from us, and hopefully our fans get that from you.
It's great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys. This was fun.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.